Hi, welcome to Carrie O'Toole Ministries and radsibs.org. We've got our coaches here. I'm Carrie. Amy, wave your hand real quick. And Jen, those are our coaches with Carrie O'Toole Ministries. And then we've got Monica with radsibs.org. Hi, Monica. Thanks, you guys, for joining us. Thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate it. We have been working together with our two ministries, our organizations, to provide some help to the kids that get lost in the whole mix with RAD. And these are the siblings that don't have any attachment issues, that haven't experienced trauma until it came into their homes. And these are the kids that oftentimes get overlooked because there's, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or whatever the saying says, that they just get overlooked because there's fires going on all over the place, and parents are so trying to just hold it together. And so we've got these other kids and they're suffering. And we have found that the age group that we're working with right now is ages 8 to 13. And you guys pipe in anytime, but what we're finding is that that's really a great age, because if we can catch them there, we really have a chance to not let that trauma settle in them, and to teach them some good life skills that they're going to need their whole lives anyway, but to teach them how to have boundaries, and how to have a voice, and how to speak up when they need to, and how to even recognize what their needs are, and to know what's healthy and what's not healthy. Jen and Amy, do you have anything you want to share, just based on the kids that you've seen, that like, what are the skills that these kids are needing? What is it that they need when they come to these groups?
I think the one thing that comes to my mind is that they need the skill of just speaking up for themselves. They're often just sort of silenced by the trauma, and so that's why we sort of call them glass children, right? I mean, their needs are unmet, not by the fault of the parent, but just that the parent is stretched so thin that they can't possibly meet the needs of all the people in the home. And so I think these kids sort of resort to just like staying silent because it's better than rocking the boat and making more stress for the parent. So I think that's one of the biggest skills I feel like the kids need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about you, Amy?
Absolutely, especially at that young age, they're just when we're talking about trauma at such a young age, the kids are doing the best they can to manage their own nervous system by themselves, because mom and dad aren't available to help them manage their anxiety and their fear. And so if they're young, there's really not a lot of options. They either act out like is being seen in other kids, or they shut down. When we're outside our window of tolerance, we're either like out here big hyper nervous system, or we shut down. And so most of the time what we see with these kids is that they shut down to control their anxiety and make that feeling of scared for mom and dad, scared for themselves, scared for their siblings, calm it down. And
Right.
so helping them learn how to get back in their body and think about what they're feeling and speak up for themselves, that they just can't. Their nervous system kind of just works against them at that point for
Yeah.
connection.
And Monica, both you and I are Rad Sibs as well. And that's why you created your organization, which is so fantastic. And so we've kind of been finding some things over the last couple of years. Can you share a little bit about what we've been finding and what the goal is for these groups, and how we want to vet a little bit better to make sure that these groups are really what these kids are needing?
Absolutely. The term glass child was introduced earlier, and again, that really goes to show how we inadvertently see through our children that don't have these big behaviors that our kids with RAD do, and we kind of just see through them. And those children really kind of fit into that role themselves. They find themselves being more typically peacekeepers in the house, and they, as you said, they don't want to rock the boat. So while they struggle and they have all the same pain essentially that the moms and dads do, as well as just those that are in the home, they have the coping skills of kids, and they really don't have the background and experience to be able to sort through how best they can meet those needs and express those needs. So with that, we want to make sure that we provide them a place that is completely, safe for them to be able to share and speak up, because typically, they have maybe have tried in the past, even at those young ages, just a little bit with their parents. And again, not to the fault of the parents, but because I'm a mom, as we all are as well.
We all are. Yeah.
Rad moms as well.
Just to make sure everybody who's watching knows, we all have parented kids with RAD. We all have kids that were the glass child in our homes. We've all overlooked them or not seen it and didn't know. So there's no blame or judgment or anything. We're just trying to help, see some of the things that we didn't see.
Absolutely. And with that, to be able for us to be able to come alongside you as the parents to provide that for you, that again, that you just aren't able to necessarily at this moment in time, as long as, the kid with RAD is kind of pulling all those resources. We want to be able to provide that space and just kind of carve out that little bit of time where the coaches can meet with them and that the kids can see that they're not alone. That is the number one need expressed by SIBs of all ages that we found that have reached out to us, is that, it's very isolating as it is for the parents. It's, I think it was C.S. Lewis maybe that said this. It was, I don't think that children suffer less than adults, just differently. And so again, the kids are seeing all the same things that we're seeing, and sometimes even more things that we're not aware of as the parents. That happen because we can't be there all the time. And so they need a place to be able to go where they're not going to feel like they have to be careful about what they say. If they speak truth, they need a place where they can do that safely and not worry that it's going to cause more issues for their parents or cause bigger behaviors from their siblings with RAD. So in order for us to do that, we need to be able to make sure that other children that are in the home that are somewhere on that RAD spectrum, that they are not pulling those resources once again. So we really want to provide a protective space for these glass kids to be seen and to be heard, and without causing further issues.
So we've kind of been chatting about this over the last few months as we've been watching and just seeing how the groups have gone. And we've had some kids in there once in a while that were kind of like I'm not sure if this is the best format for this child or for the group to have them in there. And so we want to talk about what does that look like and how does this happen? And so, for us as parents, especially if you've adopted more than one child, and it doesn't have to necessarily be an adopted child, it could just be any child that has had their own developmental trauma. Sometimes you have one that is super severe, and so that one, the groups that we've been running, sometimes the children are still in the home, sometimes the kids have been out of the home. We're going to try and separate that out so that they're not triggering each other, and all the kids have the same, somewhat the same type of experience. But if that child has been placed in, either a boarding school or a treatment facility or a new home or whatever the case may be, the other children may look so much better in comparison. And so how would you even know if there's something in there? Let's talk about that for a minute. Monica, what would you say about that?
Well, I mean, I can speak from personal experience with, we took in a sibling group of 3, and they were all eventually, we realized after several years, they were all on that RAD spectrum. We weren't really prepared to accept that for a while. So personally, we really focused in on one of our kids that had more violent behaviors. And so it took us a few years, but we were really, we eventually were willing to acknowledge, okay, this is rad. There's this thing called rad. And, she's acting out with all these behaviors, and it's very frightening and all of those things. And once we got her help outside the home, we began to realize, okay, our other children actually do have rad as well. And they were biological siblings. They happen to be a sibling group. But I really wasn't able to accept that previously, because I just didn't want to, honestly.
Well,
really,
I think, Monica, for the parents, it's so devastating discovering that there's one. It's like it can wreck you. It's the hardest thing we've all been through in our entire lives. And so you get through that and you breathe a sigh of relief, and then you start to have an inkling that maybe one of the others or two of the, that it's so overwhelming.
yes.
And we just want you to know, parents, that we get it. And I mean,
It's hard.
my heart
And-
just,
yeah.
breaks.
And and again, they all had experienced that developmental trauma, but we so focused in on the one with violent behaviors that we just really didn't want to believe that our other girls could have been impacted the same way. And so looking at that, honestly, if these groups had become available at that time, I probably would have tried to enroll one of my other girls with rad in the group, with the hope that, okay, this is, I didn't want to accept that she had rad too, and with the hope that she could get help through these groups. And we were very much, wanting all of our girls, including our biological child, we wanted to treat them all the same. So that was part of it. We wanted to believe they were, all the same, essentially, in developmentally, and they obviously weren't. So, we understand the desire and that desperation that we feel as parents to look for help and try to get the best help we can for our kids. And we want to encourage you to do that. And with that, we want to be very clear that what we can provide through these groups and who we can truly help through these groups. And it really is the kids that are not on the rad spectrum, that have not experienced that developmental trauma,
Right.
in that way.
And so we're talking about the children who have not experienced abuse or neglect before they came to you, the kids who have bonded in a fairly healthy way with you. I mean, not perfectly, but fairly healthy. And, let's talk just for a minute. I don't know, Amy or Jen, if you want to jump in on this one, but sometimes I've had clients who have said, oh, my kid is so bonded, in fact, they won't ever leave me, and that's always a little bit of a red flag, because that's not a healthy attachment. And so, but when you've had a child who's been diagnosed with rad, the other can seem so much better. And yet, so maybe describe a little bit of that, and then maybe if either of you have an example, not specific, don't give anything away, but something from your groups where you could really tell that it either shut the other kids down. How does it impact the group? So I threw two questions out there. I'll just let you guys go.
Well, I did the older groups up until now. And so in my groups, if they don't want to be there, which in the older kids, a lot of times they don't, then that can look like just not participating. They mute their computer, and then they're on a phone or something like that. They're not really paying attention, or they're just, a really hard thing is just sitting there in silence with kind of looking like the teenager attitude, I'm too cool for this. And then that makes the other kids afraid to say anything, because they think that silent person is sitting there judging them. And so it's really important that they want to. So that was one of the things that we put on our what is that, a survey, or I don't know, our registration.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, intake. Yeah. Because having a kid sit there like this or be like this all the time, through the whole hour, just, why are you here? So that's I think in the older group how it looks. I'll let Jen speak to the younger kiddos.
Yeah, I think in the younger group, you know, in the last group that I just led, there were a few siblings that were also adopted. And that to me was sort of a little bit of a red flag. Not that they don't belong in that group, but I think it's just indicative of the fact that they think that we're talking about RAD in association only with adopted kids. And I had to make that very clear that if you're also adopted, that does not mean that you have RAD. And so I think it's up to the parents to like filter that through.
Mhm.
Like, do you think they're on the spectrum? If you do, then clearly they should not be in this group, because this group is designed for the glass children.
Yeah, and we don't want those kids who are adopted to start feeling like we're talking about them,
Exactly.
or that we're saying they have the same behaviors just because they're adopted. But we also want the parents to know that if they do have some of the RAD behaviors, it's going to shut the whole group down, because the reason these kids are there is to get away from that.
Mhm.
And so if they come into the group and find somebody who is even mildly like their sibling,
Mhm.
it's here they come to the one place that's just for them, and then they find out this isn't just for them.
Right.
And
Well, and the other way it looks is with the adopted siblings, that when the child with RAD is adopted and their sibling that's coming is the actual biological sibling, blood's thicker than water. And so a lot of times when the rest of the kids start talking about their RAD sibling, I'm a little defensive of my sister or my brother, because that trauma bond and that individuation is there. And so there's a part of me that wants to defend, and then that part of me that's connected to them feels like if I don't defend, then that means you're kind of talking about me too, because their identity is mushed up,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that becomes really hard to process the defensiveness and help get that out of this child, plus these other kids who need to say what they feel about life with the sibling.
Mhm.
And
I think Amy
that's a hard
touched on
one.
something, sorry, just to tag on to that. Amy touched on something really important there with mentioning trauma bonds. That is something that many of us as parents, we may think of that as just trauma bonds that happen in a sibling group that we brought into our home. That could be. Trauma bonds, sadly, can also develop among a biological child or a child that was already in the home with a new child coming in. So as we know, kids with RAD don't really truly attach to the other kids in the home. They will see them as tools and obstacles and use, forms of manipulation that can mimic a healthy relationship. But the other kids in the home that are capable of bonding and are bonded to the parents tend to bond with a kid with RAD or have the ability to, and the kid with RAD can exploit that. So we are very, aware with the parents that we're serving too, that those trauma bonds can exist. That is something that is important to evaluate as the parent prior to enrolling your glass child in one of these groups, being aware of the degree of that trauma bond, because just as Amy said, that can be very difficult within these groups to really work through. These groups, again, are intended for a safe place for the kids that don't necessarily have that trauma bond. They may be attached, but not in the way of kind of being confused to the point where they kind of, where that all the defensiveness that boils up, that comes up. So again, it's really these nuances are very challenging for all of the families, and we want to be sensitive to that while still providing this space that can't be penetrated, as your organization does for the moms. You have wonderful, Carry Tool Ministries provides wonderful groups for the moms and for the parents. And just like you wouldn't want to have the child with RAD being a part
Sitting
of
in
those
on your
groups.
session.
Right. We want to provide the same service for the class kids.
Yeah, and as we're talking, I'm realizing, first of all, I think we're the only place that your glass children, your children that don't, your neurotypical children, who may have had some of their own trauma even from bringing this other child in, but they're bonded. And we may be the only ones doing this. I don't know of any other organization or counseling group or anyone. We don't know of anybody else who's doing this. And so we know that there's not much support out there. We understand that. And now we're splitting it apart even more and saying, okay, we have even more criteria. We're not trying to like keep people out. We want as many kids to be helped as we can help, but the groups are not the right setting for a child who at this point has not been able to bond.
Yeah.
We're not saying it's hopeless for them. There's and the hard part for us here too right now is we don't even really have a resource to offer other than finding a therapist who works with kids with attachment issues, and that's really challenging too. So we understand that our turning a child down for this, and that's why we're asking parents, would you be the vet, the vetters of this, because we don't want to turn your child down. We don't want a child showing up into our groups and us having to say, this isn't the right fit because it's disrupting the group. We don't want to give your child a rejection. So just don't bring it up to them if you think this may be the issue. And if you're struggling and you're thinking, well, they're not 100% bonded, but I think that they'd be okay in this group, let us know. Contact us through our website. It's just carryotool.com, and go to the contact us and set up a phone call. And one of the three of us coaches will talk you through it, and we'll help you figure out if this is the best fit, because we want as many of these kids getting help as we can. But the way that we're going to help them is by protecting them. And it's not to say that children that aren't bonded are bad. We're not saying that at all. We're not like, we don't need to protect them because they're evil or anything like that. It's just that the help for the glass children needs to be away from anything resembling RAD. So other comments from you guys or anything else you want to bring up?
One issue that I ran into in this last group of kids was there was a couple of the participants that I quickly realized were, in their association with the trauma with the RAD sibling, were parentified. And so they were, what I mean by that is they were sort of acting in a primary role as a caretaker for that other sibling. And so I really spent some time on that as well, and talking about who that responsibility should go to, and that children never should be responsible like parents would be. And so just sort of helping them to separate some of those roles that they were forced into, separating that out and kind of thinking about that in a new way. And it was, I think it was good, because I don't think they've ever been really acknowledged that was actually happening, and given permission that didn't need to continue. So I think,
and just to remind the parents too, we are all parents and we've all done it. We've all put our kids in that spot at one point or another, unintentionally. And so we know how to do the repair work on that too, if you need some help with that. But that's a great thought, Jen. Amy, go ahead.
It's just important to remember that anything that happens is the survival skill kicking in. Yeah. And God gave us the survival skill. It's not a bad thing. It happens because God wants us to survive a life on earth with sin. And so it just kicks in. We develop a way to function, and it is all about managing our nervous system with these, especially when we're little, but even as in adults, we have to have a way to regulate ourselves. And so and I wanted to say too, while I have the floor, about the kids that come together in a trauma bond can be the biological kids.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be like a biological kid, coming and helping this adopted child. I had a situation where siblings came together, biological siblings came together to the group. And it became obvious almost immediately to me that we had like a codependent relationship going on between these two, where we had older sibling managing everything, managing the computer, managing everything, sitting close to it. And then we had younger sibling sitting back behind, kind of in the shadow of older sibling, not even appearing to be in the group.
Mhm.
And not speaking. Older sibling was speaking for younger sibling and all of that. And so we had to deal with the anxiety of the younger sibling, and to recognize that older sibling, that's also from anxiety. That's how that nervous system managed by taking some control.
Now,
And the
Amy, real
younger
quick,
sibling managed his anxiety by sitting back and letting somebody else take control. But it's the same
Right.
thing. They're outside their window of tolerance, and they're figuring out how to survive this.
now, would you say were either of these kids diagnosed with RAD, or was it appropriate for them to be in the group? You were okay with having them in the group? This is just a situation that you needed to
Yeah,
address.
definitely the group would have been fine for both of them, but it would have been better for them to be not in the same group. So I think that's important too, is that when we find this, we just want, oh my gosh, help all my kids, right? And so everybody go.
Yeah.
It's like in the summer when we send them all to VBS. But that's not the best case scenario. They would have both had a better group experience and more personalized to their needs, I think, if they had been separated.
Yeah.
So consider that, yes, everybody gets a turn, but they don't need to happen at the same time. It's
Well, and
okay.
I think that's a great point, Amy, and I think that goes back to like the sort of the responsibility on the parent to, to tell us, like, maybe some of the personality traits or the relationship traits between a sibling. In this last group that I had great responses from parents as far as what their kids needed help with. So I could take that information and sort of soak it into myself before I started the group, so I could really be very specific about what we touched on. So I think parent information ahead of time for us is fantastic. And also just parents thinking through, like, maybe they're not going to be, great together in a group at the same time.
Yeah, and if they both are pretty assertive and not in competition with each other, and they're fairly well bonded, it might work okay. But even if that were to happen, what you guys have discovered is they would each need their own device and need to be in their own room, in their own space, to be able to be their own person in the group. Is that?
And I just want to say that this is very common. What is being described here is very common among glass kids that are in the same home with each other. Honestly, it mimics, it's similar in a lot of ways to other, and this may be hard to hear, but it's similar to other families that when there's some sort of domestic violence, or there's just those types of issues going on. Alcoholism, it's very similar to that, where the kids that don't have that specific, those big behaviors that aren't on the RAD spectrum, the glass kids, you'll find that codependency, or that the oldest child in that situation will assume responsibility. And and we, even as the panel that we had, sibling panel that we had at the last RAD Advocates Conference, we found from them too, they were young adults, and they would refer to themselves along with their parents, alongside their parents as a team.
Yeah, we adopted and we did this,
right,
and
because
we did that.
Right, because they were, I mean, essentially they're kind of signed up for this, as the parents make these decisions, the kids live in the reality as well.
Yeah.
And again, no shame there whatsoever at all. It's just that acknowledgement of our kids see themselves, they're bonded to us. They want to help us. They want to help keep the peace in the home. And sometimes the way that they find that they think is best to do that is by managing their younger siblings, helping again to not have issues boil up that are going to be problematic for the parents because the parents' attention, is focused on those bigger behaviors from their sibling with RAD. So definitely something that is very common. So for parents just to be aware that it's it's not some specific area of failure, or it's just a natural thing that takes place, as Amy and Jen have said as well. That
Yeah, and I want to speak again to the parents, because as you're listening to this, it's hard. This is hard stuff. And you may almost be terrified to let your kid participate, because right now they're not making waves. They're staying quiet. You don't have to deal with them. And you may just feel overwhelmed with everything else and think, oh, if I put them into this, then they're going to start, having a voice and telling me what they don't like about me. And I don't know if I can handle that. And I get that. I've been there. I've had my daughter confront me about numerous things, and it's been hard. But we have such a better relationship because of it. And so don't let your fear get in the way. We're talking about the potential of even running a parent group alongside the sibling groups. We're still working on those details, and we'll let you know as the next groups come out. But if you find that your child, that even the thought of your child like not being part of the parent group, or not being quiet over here, terrifies you, work on that yourself so your child can get the help that they need. And we know how to help you with that, because we've all been there and had to go through it ourselves. So please don't let that be a reason not to sign your kids up because you're scared. We get it, and we'll walk you through with all the grace that we give your kids as well. So we don't come in attacking parents like maybe you've had with counselors, because we've all had that too. So we want to be a safe place for the parents, and we want to make sure these groups are a safe place for the glass siblings. Any other comments here before we go?
Just the goal there for the kids is we want to improve that relationship that they have with you. We're wanting to encourage an authentic, vulnerable relationship that most of us moms, right? That's what we really want.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing through this as well, is helping the glass kids to cope and to improve their relationships with you. And
because
the
really
younger,
what
the
many
better.
of them say when they come to us is they feel like they lost their parents,
Mhm.
and they're grieving that, and they want a better relationship with you too. So that's why we're
Absolutely.
doing this. So anyway, what we're asking is that in the vetting process, you will need to check off the box that says you've watched this video before we admit your child, so that we know that we've got kids who are all going to be safe with each other as they work on healing. So thanks for watching, and reach out to any of us at either radsibs.org or carryotool.com, and we're all here to help. Thanks for watching.